Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een, amma ba'd. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. Today, Insha'Allah, we'll continue our discussion of the Quranic miracles by highlighting some of the amazing examples of iron that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us in the Quran. So, this is Surah Hadid, and this chapter is actually named after iron itself. So this gives us a sense of the significance of iron. So this is in the 27th juz of the Quran, chapter number 57, verse number 25. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم لقد أرسلنا رسلنا بالبينات وأنزلنا معهم الكتاب والميزان ليقوم الناس بالقسط وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدَ فِيهِ بَأْسٌ شَدِيدٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. And the verse goes on. So in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ, that indeed we have sent down messengers with clear proofs, with clear signs. وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابِ, and with them we have sent down books. وَالْمِيزَانَ لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ, and we have sent down a scale as well, so that the people may uphold justice, referring to the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And very interestingly enough, in this same verse, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about, messengers being sent down with books and a justice system, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions that He sent down iron as well. وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدِ, He also sent down iron. فِيهِ بَأْسٌ شَدِيدٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ, in it there is a lot of power, a lot of might. وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ, and there's benefit of it to mankind. So once again, the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning iron in the same context that He's mentioning, messengers and, Islam and His message being sent, it really goes to show that iron was given special importance by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are numerous examples of miracles of this element of iron that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us in the Quran. And these are very subtle miracles that if we don't take the time to actually, study the Quran and analyze it, it's something that can be easily missed, So once again, this highlights the principle that we need to become people who reflect upon the Quran and study it carefully so that we can really unlock all of the hidden miracles that are in the Quran. So with that being said, let's actually talk about iron as an element, and that will actually give us a little bit of a framework so that we can study these miracles more closely. So as we know, we're surrounded by different elements in nature, so we have iron, for example, you have oxygen, you have hydrogen, helium. These are all elements, and each of these elements are made up of individual atoms, okay? So the atoms are actually the building blocks of these elements. And, like I mentioned in previous videos as well, atoms are made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. So these are the building blocks of atoms themselves. Now, the way that we recognize elements is by their atomic number, okay? So the atomic number is the number of protons that an element has, and this is unique to each element. So for example, iron has 26 protons in its atom, okay? Iron has 26 protons, therefore iron's atomic number is 26, okay? So let's actually take a look at this number 26. It's very interesting. Before the actual numeral system came out, there was actually a system called the abjad system, okay? And this was actually a way for, Arabs to come up with numbers, but it used letters as a form of a numeral system, okay? So for example, each letter had its own numerical value, okay? So for example, alif had the numerical value of 1, and similarly, each different letter had their own numerical value. So if we actually look at this numeral system a lot closer, this geometrical value of each letter, it actually turns out that this word hadid, okay, it consists of 4 letters, right? It consists of ha, dal, ya, and dal. And if we look at the individual numbers that these letters correspond to, it turns out that ha corresponds to the number 8, dal corresponds to the number 4, ya corresponds to the number 10, And once again, dal corresponds to the number 4. So spelling out these 4 letters, you actually get the word hadid. And if you add up their individual numerical values, you end up with the number 26. And subhanAllah, like I mentioned before, 26 is the actual atomic number of iron. So, that's a very interesting miracle that if you don't actually take the time and think about it and put the pieces together, something that can be easily missed. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave that for us in the Quran, highlighting the miraculous nature of iron itself. Now, moving on from that miracle, let's go to another principle called the atomic mass of an element, okay? So the atomic mass is simply the number of protons and the number of neutrons in an element added together, okay? So you have, for iron, for example, it has 26 protons, okay? That's something that doesn't change. But you can have a variation of number of neutrons, okay? So if you add them together, you can have different atomic masses according to which atoms have a different number of neutrons, okay? And these are called isotopes, okay? So it turns out in nature that the stable isotopes of iron, the stable atomic masses of iron are 54, 56, 57, and 58. Okay, so the number of protons doesn't change, it's always 26, but the number of neutrons can change depending on which type of the element it is. And from iron, we know that these stable different masses are 54, 56, 57, and 58. And it turns out that Surah Hadid is actually 57, right? So this is exactly one of the stable atomic masses that iron can take in nature. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave that number to be 57 in the Quran, which exactly corresponds to that number in nature. And not only that, so, we look at iron from an atomic perspective, but if we look at it from a macro perspective, something on a much larger scale, it turns out that the actual core of the earth is actually made up of solid iron, okay? So at the center of the earth, you have this ball of iron, okay? So with that principle in mind, that at the center of the earth, there is iron, let's take a look at the layout of the Quran, okay? I mentioned before that Surah Hadid is chapter number 57, and there are 114 chapters in the Quran in total. Well, if you look at the exact middle of that, the middle of 114 is actually 57 exactly. So subhanAllah, this once again highlights the fact that just as there is iron at the center of the earth, there is iron in the center of the Quran as well, subhanAllah, with Surah Hadid being chapter number 57. Now, with that same principle of iron being at the core of the earth, okay, scientists have actually measured how far down that iron core is. And it turns out that the iron core is actually located 5,100 kilometers from the surface of the earth. Okay, so from the surface of the earth, if you go down 5,100 kilometers, you'll actually get to that point of Earth's core where there's solid iron. Well, it turns out that if you start from Surah Al-Fatiha, the first verse of the Quran, in the Quranic layout as we know it, and you end up at this specific verse that I mentioned, Surah Hadid, chapter number 57, verse number 25, it is exactly 5,100 verses to get to this verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions iron. So subhanAllah, look at that parallel, just as it takes 5,100 kilometers to get to iron in the earth's core, it takes 5,100 verses to get to iron in the Quran as well. Subhanallah, this is something that is truly amazing, something that is easily missed if we don't take the time to reflect upon it. So once again, these are just some of the amazing miracles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us in the Quran regarding iron. And as we know, it is something that is very important and very useful for us in nature and in our practical lives as well. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said there is great power and there's great benefit for it, to mankind. And that's something that is definitely true, something that we see today. So with that, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He allow us to study these amazing, miraculous qualities of the Quran, and He allow us to increase our iman as a result of it, and He allow us to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Quran. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.